Hello, good morning. All right. Let me make sure my technology is doing its thing, and then we will get going. If you are watching the recording, feel free to skip ahead about a minute or so to get to the content. I do upload these onto my YouTube channel, so if you're watching from YouTube, thank you very much. And like I said, feel free to skip ahead while I give people a moment to get on, and I make sure everything is working. I'm also going to share this out as well. And invite some people to watch this. Let's see here. Make sure we got sound. We have sound. That is awesome. Okay, I don't want to have too much sound. Okay, so I'm going to share this out to a few places and then we're going to get going. So make sure you grab a pen and some paper to take some notes. And yeah, so you can get some good stuff. All right. And I'm going to share one more place and then we're going to get going. Where is it? There it is. Okay, awesome. All right, so we are ready to go. So first, I want to welcome you. My name is Lysandra Everett, and I am the Home Biz Tax Lady. If you've never been on my show, I'm here Monday through Friday, 9 o'clock-ish. And when you tune in, you're going to hear about mainly tax topics, as I am a tax professional. But we also talk about business and leadership and just how to do this whole thing called life a little bit better. But my focus, because I am a tax professional, is on taxes and just how we can do better, okay? So for today's show, I am talking about 5 ways to settle your IRS debt. Before I get started, let me say this. Everything that I share on my videos, this is strictly for presentation purposes. I advise you to reach out to your tax professional about your particular tax situation, as everybody's tax situation is different, okay? So let's talk about today, 5 ways to settle your IRS debt. Every year, starting about May-ish, this is when people start getting letters from the IRS. When taxpayers have filed their taxes and they have a tax liability that they haven't paid, the IRS sends you a letter. Now, I will always reiterate this time and time and time again. The IRS does not call you. They do not email you. They will send you a letter. Now, if you establish contact with the person, they may call you. However, that's not going to be their first contact with you. It will be by a letter that you will get in by snail mail, okay? Postal service, all right? So that's how the IRS will contact you. And that is actually what starts the collection process. So with today's broadcast, I'm going to talk more about 5 ways to settle your IRS debt, okay? Okay, so let us get started with the first one. And yeah, so this is very cool. I'm broadcasting live from my homepage and I love this whole Be Live thing. All right, that's enough of that. Moving on. Okay, so the first thing is to pay as much as you can. And you said, okay, listen, I thought you said we're going to talk about settling the IRS debt. Okay, so let me say this. When you file your taxes, even if you can't pay your total amount due, you should pay as much as you can, because you're going to incur penalties and interest, and that's going to be a percentage of the amount of your total amount that you owe. So the less you owe, then the less those penalties and that interest is going to be. So you want to pay as much as you can, as soon as you can. This is also why I recommend people filing early. You have, especially for my W-2 filers and even for my folks that receive 1099s, you should have those documents in hand by the end of January. I highly recommend you filing your taxes in February or March. Why? Because if you owe, you can file the paperwork, but you have until April 15th to submit payment normally. So if you wind up owing, the sooner you find out, the sooner that you can make preparations to pay as much as you can by the April 15th deadline. So that's why I recommend filing your taxes early and not waiting until April 15th, because then you have no wiggle room. Okay. So to be quite honest, this is what I do. I have my documentation in place. I have my home-based business. And so I file my taxes no later than the end of February, the 1st of March. Why? Because you know what? At some point I'm going to owe, and I'd like to be able to know exactly how much that is and have a little bit of time to get some cash together to pay for that. Okay. So that's the first thing. All right. Number 2 is what's called a short-term extension. Okay. And then when you pop on, let me know who you are and where you're from so I can say, hey. Okay, so the next is a short-term extension. Now, with a short-term extension, you are saying that you can pay your tax liability within 120 days or less, okay? Now, with that, there's generally notice I say generally, okay, because you know what? The IRS is controlling what they do, and depending on what has happened, how this has transpired, is going to determine whether or not you get penalties. But if you qualify for a short-term extension, there's generally no penalties involved, but you're still going to have interest accruing, okay? So you may qualify for a short-term extension. You got to pay within 120 days. All right, number 3. This is some gee whiz stuff that most people don't know, all right? You can file for extension to pay. Okay. Now, filing for an extension to pay. Now, this is something that most people don't know, all right? You can file what's called a form, file 1127. Now, with this 1127 form, you can apply for a 6-month extension to pay your tax liability. Again, there are no penalties added to this, but your interest is still accruing. Now, the thing that you need to know about the 1127 is that this is not automatic. Where you file for an extension to file your taxes, that extension is automatic. The extension to pay your taxes is not automatic. So what you want to do, first of all, this is why, again, I recommend you file early, because as soon as you know that you have this tax liability that you might not be able to pay, you want to file this 1127. And because it's going to require some human intervention, it's going to take a little bit longer to either receive an approval or a rejection. Again, this is not an automatic request, okay? This is not an automatic approval. What this is this form says that you want to request an extension to pay because of some undue hardship. What might that mean? You might have had some medical emergency that required a huge cash outlay. And with the way that our healthcare is going, this might be a very common thing in the near future. Who knows? You might also have had, let's say, some huge funeral expense that you had to pay unexpectedly, okay? But you have to be able to prove the hardship in order for this to get approved. Now, again, this is a hardship, not an inconvenience. You wanting to go on a 10-day cruise is not an undue hardship, okay? That's an inconvenience, all right? So it's got to be something that was going to cause some hardship for you to pay this tax liability right now, okay? So that's some gee whiz stuff right there that you need to know. All right, what are we on? Number 4. Okay, these are the things that people hear about most of the time, 4 and 5. All right, so 4 is the payment plan. Now, if you owe $50,000 or less to the IRS, you might qualify for a payment agreement, and you can actually do this online. Now, the fees to establish the payment agreement can range from $31 to $225. There are some low income setup fees if you qualify. Okay, this is all about qualifying. So don't sit there and say, okay, well, Lysandra said this is only going to cost me $31. No, it can range from $31 to $225 depending on your finance, your income level. Okay, now this amount is generally added to your tax liability. So you may not have to pay this up front. I want to make sure I say that explicitly, okay? But anyway, so with this payment plan, this is what you can establish to pay off your tax debt over time in equal payments, okay? So that's number 4. And number 5. Okay. This is the one, oops, that is not spelled correctly. Let's try this again. Okay, this is what people hear about the most. The offer in compromise. This is where you hear people on the TV, excuse me just a moment, where you hear these commercials on the TV. If you owe $10,000 or more to the IRS, we can settle your tax debt for pennies on the dollar. Okay. This is those, and then they go on to say, you know, I owed $60,000 in back taxes and I settled for $500. Let's talk about it. Okay. So first of all, with the offer in compromise, it can be accepted or rejected. Okay. And there is a $186 setup fee. Now there's 2 types of offers in compromise. There's the lump sum, and then there's the periodic payment. Now, if you submit for a lump sum, a lump sum type of offer in compromise, then you must submit along with the $186, 20% of the amount that you're offering. Okay. Now this is non-refundable. You do not get this money back. Even if they reject it, you do not get this money back. And number 2, with the periodic payment, you have to submit your first payment amount along with this $186. Now, let's talk about the pennies on the dollar part, because this is where I think people really, you know, get excited, but it's because of a lack of understanding. So for the IRS to settle with you, they have to look at, you know, your ability to pay. And we'll talk about that on another live broadcast. And so what this means is the IRS has 10 years from the date of the assessment to collect your tax debt. So if they look at your ability to pay versus your tax debt, if they believe they can get all this money within 10 years, they're not going to settle. Okay. If you owe $20,000 in tax debt and you make $200,000 a year, then guess what? If you can pay off that $20,000 in 10 years, they're not going to settle with you. So when people are talking about they're settling for pennies on the dollar, that's because they have nothing. Okay. We're talking about people that may not have a job or has some serious financial hardship that they can't pay their entire, tax liability. You might have someone who was making $100,000 when they incurred this debt, but now they have lost their job. So yeah, that would be a reason to submit an offer in compromise, but you're not going to be sitting in a 5-bedroom house with 2 boats and 4 cars thinking that you are just going to settle this IRS debt for less than what you owe. Doesn't work like that. Okay. So when we're talking about an offer in compromise, when people say pennies on the dollar, they ain't saying exactly how many pennies on the dollar. Okay. 95% is still 95 pennies on the dollar versus 5 cents, which is 5 pennies on the dollar. Okay. So I want you to be aware of that when you hear these commercials and are thinking, okay, maybe this will work for me. It just depends on your financial situation, which the IRS makes that determination. Okay. So with that, I mean, that's the 5 main ways to settle with the IRS. Now, here's the other thing that you also need to understand. In order for the IRS to work with you, you must have filed all of your taxes. Okay. If you've got years that you have not filed your taxes, you must file them all before you get a payment plan, before you get an offer and compromise, all of that stuff. And once this stuff is established, then you have to continue filing your taxes on time. Okay. When you miss a payment or you don't file your taxes, then they have the right to pull that offer and compromise, that payment plan, or what have you, because now you have not abided by the agreement. Now, to go through this process of offer and compromise, this offer and compromise takes some time, okay? This is not a, hey, I'm going to submit this form and then they're going to come back and say, sure. No, this takes some time because, again, they can accept or reject your offer, okay? And it's after careful evaluation. So I want to make sure that you understand that. But here's the deal. You do not have to go through this alone because right now, I mean, when people start getting these letters, first of all, that's already stressful enough, knowing that you have this IRS debt and understanding that the IRS is really one of the longest arms of the law. All right. Because just an example, in December 2015, I forget which act it was, but if you owe $50,000 or more in taxes, in back taxes, you can possibly not be able to renew your passport. So there ain't gonna be no leaving the country if you owe this much in taxes, okay? So just as an example. But what you need to know is that you can get help. You can get representation. You can get a tax attorney, CPA, or an enrolled agent like myself to help you deal with this situation, to help, because see, once you hire someone, then you can give them a power of attorney to deal with the IRS for you. So then it stops your phone from ringing and you're dealing with professionals. Okay. So the other thing that you have to know is that this is a time-intense process, meaning that there are certain deadlines that you have to meet. There are certain deadlines that our IRS has to meet. Missing those deadlines, guess what? It negates the whole thing, okay? So, so the nuts and bolts of this is if you have IRS debt that you need to pay, but you don't have the money, I encourage you to book a consult with me, okay? So if you need to book a consult, here we go. And during this consult, it's not a time for me to go and try to explain, what you need to do. No, this is a time to decide whether or not I can help you, okay? Or whether or not you want me to help you. One of those two things, okay? But, if you have this problem and you need some help, I encourage you to book a consult with me so we can find out what your next steps are, okay? So that's it for me for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure that you subscribe to my live broadcast so you don't miss anything. I'm broadcasting live from my fan page. So if you're not on my fan page, you just might miss it, okay? So let me look and see if I have any questions because I can't see on this thing right here. Okay, I don't see any questions, but if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to inbox me. I'm happy to help you out and answer any questions that I can for you. Okay, so thanks so much. And if you're watching from YouTube, you got some value, make sure you subscribe and I will see you all next time. Bye.